He said, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful.
Was ever a dream? Darn them.
Hi, I'm Ubong Matthew, founder of An Hour with a Manager. This platform was created to solve a real challenge we saw across African professional spaces, which is the gap between ambition and structured leadership. Because a better manager will build a better Africa, and the world needs both. Welcome to another episode of An Hour with a Manager, Africa's premier podcast platform, with your host, Ubong Matthew. In this episode, we'll be discussing effective leadership for transformation in the public sector. And today, our discussion will be joined from a lived experience from our guest, who is a Kenyan, Patricia Wanjama, who will be sharing insights from her legal action experience, her transformation experience working with other leaders across different diverse sectors in the region, across US, across West Africa, across East Africa, Rwanda, and Kenya itself. And today, we believe that these conversations at the end of the day will be practical and insightful for leaders to be able to implement effective transformation strategy. Welcome, Patricia, to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, An Hour with a Manager, for inviting me. I am happy, I am healthy, and I am hopeful, in that order.
Hearing us mention the legal part of things and thinking, oh, is this a strict legal class you want to have? Please do well to share much about your experience and how far you've come in your journey, so that we get to meet you better.
No, this is not a legal class. This is a class in understanding how legal travels. By background, I am a trained lawyer. I qualified to the Kenya Bar 20 years ago this July. I have since then practiced in law, and now I practice in governance, corporate governance as a branch of governance, where I advise boards, I evaluate boards, and I carry out governance audits. One of my passion areas is training boards and just imparting knowledge, both from a theory standpoint and a practical standpoint, because I have served in various boards in Kenya. I feel a lot of people where they are today is a hallmark of their curiosity as individuals. That's the same thing for me. I have always grown or had my North Star driven by my curiosity. So as I mentioned, I trained in law. I graduated from university. I practiced law for 4 years. But what piqued my curiosity during that time was what was happening behind the documents I was drafting. And some of the questions I would ask the partner in charge, and a man I really admire up until today, is what's going on behind these documents? Did the transaction complete? How did the transaction get to our desks? Have we been useful? And that for me then started my journey in-house. So I moved my legal career from practice in a law firm in-house into companies, and therein I fell in love with governance.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. So right now, now we're looking at, you've led initiative, like we had mentioned, from Rwanda, Sudan, South Sudan, USA, and even in Kenya itself, right? So what are some of the lessons you've learned from working across diverse regions and in terms of culture and the way they think in their environments?
So for me, a leader, whether you are an entrepreneur, a founder, or an entrepreneur in a corporate space, for me, you have to lead yourself. You have to lead your career journey. Whether you want to start something or build something or grow something someone else has built, I find 3 or 4 key leadership pillars that are important. The first thing is strategic insight or strategic vision. Understand where you are going, either career-wise, where your business needs to go, or if you are working for an organization, where that organization is going. Have the same strategic foresight as that organization, or have it for yourself. Thereafter, be a master of your craft, the technical skills. So strategic skills, then your technical skills. Be a master of your craft. Learn, grow, upskill, cross skill if you have to. Thereafter, your people skills, because you don't build alone, you don't work alone. You need to have great interpersonal skills. And depending on where you are, you might need to have a branch of interpersonal skills, which are, if I could say, influence or a political bent to your leadership and influence skills. What do I mean by that? You might be in a space where you need to understand the lay of the land and how to move appropriately. That's why I talk about having a political bent to your interpersonal skills, better known as influence. So have your strategic vision, have your technical mastery, and have your social skills in check.
So how do you see this environment you've been
Been
able
able
to,
to,
to
to
influence
influence
based
based
on
on
what you've
what you've
said?
said.
How do you
How do
see
you see
the
the
environment
environment
moving
moving
forward? How do
forward?
you
How do you
see
see
the
the
whole
whole
political
political
landscape
landscape
or
or
public
public
sector
sector
landscape
landscape
moving
moving
forward
forward
based on
based
the
on the
environment you've been
environment
able
you've
to,
been able to,
been able to
able to
influence
influence
and
and
work with
work with
across the
across the
year?
year?
And whatever landscape you are, whether now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, those three, and I might add as well financial literacy, you must understand where you're going as an individual or for the corporate that you're working for. If it's public service, you need to understand what is the greater good. So, in this current space in Kenya, in East Africa, in Africa, we keep saying that, there's a lot of richness, there's untapped potential. Where are we going with that? How can we strategically throw our arrows to be able to point to the right direction? What skills do we need to tap this untapped potential? How do we need to work each other, the social skills? If it's public service and also corporate space, how can you be able to influence for you to be able to show what you can do technically? And thereafter, what does it add up to? In the public space, it's impact. In the private space, it is people, profit, and planet. How does it make sense in terms of CENTS? It has to make sense. It has to make sense.
What do you mean by those two statements?
Okay, so since it has to appeal to what is important at the moment. For example, right now, there's, uncertainty as to where the world is going. Will there be peace in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months? So wherever you are, whether corporate, whether in public service, whatever you're doing, are you furthering peace? And that's just one example. So, does it actually make sense? Does it, when you wake up every day, are you furthering that purpose? Then, in terms of sense, CENTS, I do this to show money. Does it add value? Does it create value? If it's in the public service, you might not think about it in monetary terms, sense, but does it bring impact? Does it affect people on a scale that changes their lives?
Talking about the three P's, that's the public-private partnerships, right? And which is already happening in the sector. So, what should we put in place to open up the region, right, for other government or other leaders to also come on board? Take, for instance, the example of the Chinese government also partnering with Kenya, to fix things like infrastructures, the real estate, and even the construction itself.
Every connection, there has to be, if you call it a symbiotism. For example, if the corporate sector wants to partner with the private sector, government, or a public sector corporation, then they need to find an area of I need you, you need me. Once we ascertain that, are you set up in a way that whatever I need, you can provide to me? Going back to the legal space, for example, if I was to be providing the police service a legal service, I they need that legal, hopefully, they need that legal service. I need the sense that come with the aftercare of providing the legal service. Am I skilled? Do I understand the lay of the land around the police sector? What laws govern them? Am I in that space, or can I quickly upskill, or can I collaborate with someone who understands their space, and then I adjust my services to provide value? And at the end of the day, my expectation would be, if it has added value, or if you have appreciated my time, then I should be also able to grow. And thereafter, have a model that works. If for the police sector, it needs X meetings, it needs me tapping into their leadership to connect with them, then that model could be replicated to other public service sector initiatives. So, in short, understand what your partner needs, whether in the private or public space. If you do not have what they need, are you able to provide it? Can you collaborate? Once you understand that and come to a model that works for you, whether you call it a letter of engagement or however you plan to provide the service, then do it and do it well. And once you receive the service, the expectation is that you then abide to these terms of engagement and pay for that service. So at the end of the day, both ends of the spectrum are happy. Public sector is around impact. For us in the governance professional space, one of the things we want to do, and maybe that's from what I have done in various corporate assessments, corporate governance assessments of the public sector, is sharing our experience, our lived experience as the governance professionals in the private sector. The private sector has a different model of operation. They're driven by profit and, of course, understanding how it impacts people and the planet. And with that comes with very clear strategic objectives, which the public sector has in their performance contracting. Then there is a pretty clear regulatory framework, sometimes placed in codes of corporate governance. So that already streamlines us as governance professionals in the private space on how we conduct ourselves. Now, is that able to be transferable to the professionals, the governance professionals in the public sector? The answer to that is yes. One, because they also have their code of corporate governance. Now, the execution of it is possibly where we can trade live experience. This is how I do it in the private sector. Is there a way you can do it in the public sector that mirrors this framework or this process or this procedure to get relatively similar outcomes, so that the governance in the public sector, which is something we all feel the effects of, bad governance affects us all. So can they ensure that the governance frameworks, policies, processes, procedures bring similar outcomes as similar to the private sector, so that the organization can be here for today, tomorrow, and years to come? Governance supports sustainability and the long-term objectives of any organization, whether private or in the public space.
All right. So, with the rise of remote work, hybrid work, and which a lot of leaders, a lot of government leaders are also integrating into the system, even private leaders, right? So, how do you see the transformation going on in the space whereby leadership can also implement also some of these strategies, right, to help leaders maintain productivity and build trust even while being productive in all that they're doing in their institutions?
So I'm a proponent of remote working. For me, remote working is it's not as new as people say. It's a new way of working. Yes, it may have increased during the pandemic time, but definitely these people, if you look a little deeper, have worked remotely most of their working life. So what does that tell us? It is possible to actually work remotely. However, you do need I like the word framework and I might overuse it ad nauseum. There needs to be a method as to how to do it. What my experience was in the in the private sector when we elected remote working, what we agreed to do was have a remote working policy that stated this is what we expect from you. This is who shall be allowed to work. So what I was talking about is to have a remote or hybrid working situation. You need a plan for it.
So, just going back to your conversation, talking about some of the frameworks, some of the challenges, right? Some of the frameworks you've mentioned from regards to the hybrid or remote work, right? And it sounds like, for those who will be listening to this, they think probably might be very easy. But can you share with us some of these challenges you encountered, right? Your team encountered while trying to implement this framework into the whole system so that both the remote teams and the hybrid team can actually implement?
So, as usual, you can try to control the process, but you cannot control the human in the process. So, one of the challenges that we quickly run into is ensuring that people keep their end of the bargain, because remote working is very attractive. You can work from anywhere, literally. And of course, it's also a cost saving technique for a lot of employees. You cut out the travel cost, you cut out even just time cost, and you're able to be, the expectation is that you're able to be more productive. However, how do you ensure that your team is disciplined enough to keep to their end of the bargain, signing off on them working remotely, then moving to work plans that could be shared, and then moving to hold people accountable for deliverables? That's where the process starts having some kinks.
You've shared quite very interesting conversations, and you've also deep down on how young people should also leverage this, right? So, but I think I'd like us to just go directly to the youth, right? So, for young entrepreneurs, founders, and professionals out there coming into the public private sectors, right? What are the skills they should also adopt that will really keep them agile and keep them implementing the right success strategies in their organizations?
Everything at this point is important, but you can, for any young person thinking about going into the legal and the governance space, start with why. Simon Sinek said that, or wrote a book about it. Why do you want to play within the space to the space you can occupy? Obviously, there's a lot of conversation. There's too many, insert profession in that dash. They might not be a niche, either lawyer, governance professional who has drilled down into a specific strand. And that's possibly one of the benefits with the understanding. You can start with your why. This is why I am doing law. This is the area that I am interested. Then quickly, and that's why we have the internet. Thank God at this time. That's why we have a on that area, the best schools, universities that offer that course, the best leaders in that particular space. They say there's nothing new under the sun, but you could be better. You could be even, once you get the course, the university, the research, the mentor, throw yourself 150%
No, 100%.
technical. Yeah, take your papers. Then, as you do that, network, find out through social media, hey, my name is, I am very am impressed by your skill in this area. Is there such assist offer value for free? I know there's something about you don't eat exposure, you don't parent in exposure, but sometimes being exposed is how you build your networks. Find the in for 20 years, some of these people were too far to reach into. Now it just needs a slide into the DM, slide into their LinkedIn messages, follow them, comment, engage. That's why you shoot for 5, you might get 1. And then again, be the best research assistant, collaborator, hired help for free. And that's how you grow your skills. Continue practicing, continue learning. And when you get opportunities, you must stand out. You must be faithful. You must grow. A time, if the path calls you to reroutes, reroutes. That happens with Google Maps. If it says you might find a new path, and sometimes that redirection is your next step. So don't be afraid to start over. In any case, as someone said, you start over with experience.
So, what are your last words for our listeners who are watching this or who are listening to this from their car or from wherever they are before we wrap up this conversation?
I say, really, the world is your playground. Sometimes it looks daunting to step out and the universe looks large. Yes, it is. That's the reality. But you can create, you can be the best you can be. And sometimes we only just need to start. And that's something I'm learning even at this point in my career. Some things you just, if your curiosity leads you there, there's a reason why your curiosity has led you there. That you do things, "Oh, you're so good at this, you're so great at this." Maybe there's something there. They ask, what's that in your hand? Whatever is in your hand is what you're naturally. So if you already have affirmation as to the path you're on or something that people keep saying that you're good at, why not follow that path? Sometimes the path of least resistance is the one that makes sense. Where your curiosity takes you, you have the advantage of interest. Once you have an interest, you're then able to dive deep and dig deep. Then one thing about the season that we are in, everybody is no longer 6-7 degrees of separation. There's about 1 to 2 degrees of separation, be it LinkedIn, be it social media. People that you see who are doing well, you can use them as your mentors. They don't actually have to have day-to-day conversations with you. You can follow them, you can reach out to them and say, exposure. However, it does lead you to that opportunity that you for free. Then those are the people who can hold your hand, who can introduce you into rooms that you do not have access to, and therein possibly starts your path to success.
If you enjoyed this conversation of an hour with the manager, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with other leaders around you. Let's continue to build a conversation 1 hour at a time.
Going back in the bed, jumping on the stage, you know, average in the gamble.